Another presentation on the series of um, Heidegger Dulphine. So this time let's start by looking at Carl Jung's um, Dostoevsky and Tolstoy according to his typology and personality theory. And then I'll try to show these personalities, or we're just investigating on part of it. I mean, one, we're saying what Jung said, but also we're investigating. But the investigation will be part of the theory of the pantheon of the ancient Greeks, especially as in appears in so-called Homer or Homer. I mean, because I think there was a guy called Homer, even though there's also this rhapsode tradition, which is altered it and kept it from the fate of museumification or whatever would happen in an oral tradition. So let's look at this. Dostoevsky on the one side, and so what we're doing is trying to get some orientation in a personality group, and the claim is that Heidegger understood as Heidegger Dulphine here, which is to say exactly the same thing. Heidegger understood in a particular personality theories observation, and then according to the notion that this personality is a candidate for the guiding personality. So let's look and sort of like as comparable to Socrates, as comparable to Christ on different levels and on different accounts, but connectedly. Then you'd have the same figure sort of for this tradition. That tradition that Heidegger represents himself as the leading figure in. Or in a certain way, as Dugin says, Heidegger is the prince. Plato is the king, Heidegger is the prince. Do we want to tame the prince? Is Harvey Mansfield's title about taming the prince understood as the Machiavellian sense, sort of in a way applies to the current situation. Possibly. But let's never mind that. So let's try to get orientation just by looking at these two figures. One, from Jung's point of view. Jung says that Dostoevsky is introverted thinking type, and the introverted thinking type is the incomprehensible and sometimes the fanatical. So the underground man is the kind of the fanatic in a way. And especially because he's rejected reason entirely. And something like the sense of the toothache, a man can sometimes enjoy a toothache, and it's something like the sense of the 2 times 2 is 34, sometimes is also something one wants to pursue. One doesn't always have to pursue knowledge understood narrowly. So this type, I'm associating, I would say, more with Hades or more with the sunken world, and I'm considering in a certain way it's more like Joe Pesci, I think. It's less like Robert De Niro. And so then I think on the other side you could see Tolstoy is more like Robert De Niro, more like Trump. But how does Jung, and then I associate this with certain figures in the, probably with, possibly with Poseidon, I want to say, Theseus, a little bit, not really quite Theseus type, more like Hercules type. Not sure. I'm not sure which of the gods corresponds to Hercules, the hero, which is kind of a problem. I think the Hercules type is also sort of the Shiro Mifune type. maybe Benicio del Toro type, if you were in sort of like given the full size of that personality, we imagine it a larger, stronger personality, but in that direction. So we haven't said anything, and it will leave that to a future laying out of the theory to say what does this so-called personality in a given mold or given direction consist of. But we're just looking at some basic features. Generally speaking, it consists of certain responsiveness to certain things. Like somebody has responsiveness to music, somebody has responsiveness to moving things around until they fix. Like the sensibility of a mechanic is a certain type of responsiveness to things. So we have the Tolstoy type is more characterized than by Jung as intuition type. He calls the Tolstoy type an intuition type. And I say the Tolstoy type, but I mean Tolstoy himself. But the type it indicates, and it's as it were the type he's most approximates the actual idea of the type. So it's like a more more beautiful form of it, more good, more full, more true form of that of the type as it usually appears. It's more like the type that corresponds to the actual image, as it were, to the actual archetype, or to the actual genus, let's say, to the actual genus. It is possible to sort of say corresponding, there's these groups where on the one side you get this type that's more the strong type, and on the other side you get the type that's more the Joe Pesci type or something, more talkative. If this can be discerned again and again as a sort of a type, as a genus, as a type, and it was seen by the Greeks and depicted in one way. In the Pantheon, it was seen by Jung and shown in this sense, and connected to this theory of the introvert, extrovert, and the four different variations. I think if we show, so we're trying to show Heidegger, and we're saying the Hermes type is always somehow slightly fuller and slightly more expressing the whole group than all the rest of the ones in the type. And the Hermes type would, in this case, would be Heidegger. So Heidegger would stand over as the Hermes type. This Dostoevsky as something like the Hades type, maybe. And on the other hand, Tolstoy is something like the Poseidon type, let's say, the Poseidon type. So that these two counter kingdoms show themselves, but the Hermes type isn't really a kingdom. It's something else. It's not a specific domain. It's philosophy itself. It's something else. So I would try to situate. So far as we can again identify groupings, and in anywhere we could find them. It's easier to find them in films because everybody knows to refer. Everybody knows what you're talking about. Because otherwise, if you just identify people that you know, then it doesn't help that much for general communication. Except that they take your word for it, but then they wouldn't really be seeing it for themselves. We could try to test this, and then The other question here is, so if there's an idea, as it were, the idea of the Hermes type itself, and we have for some evidence, we have Socrates is filling that role. And then Heidegger is supposed to be filling this role. How does Heidegger then, is he a full expression of the idea of the Hermes type, or is he a lower, it's some personality cluster of a lower fullness of responsiveness? And then in which way is it worse? And then to what should the center of the model be?